Welcome to LA Currents. I'm Ann Pulice. Joining us today, we welcome Stephen David Simon. He is the Executive Director and the General Manager for the Department on Disability. We're so glad to have you with us today, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Ann. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming. Let's just start with the basics. What is considered a disability here in the city of Los Angeles?
Under the ADA, it's having a physical or mental impairment that impacts a major life activity. And a major life activity is hearing, seeing, talking, standing, learning, walking, bending over, your body working, your circulatory system, your respiratory system. It's really very broadly defined, and we try and support anybody with a disability. For the Social Security Administration, where it's about work and benefits, it's having a physical or mental impairment that stops you from substantial gainful employment for more than a year.
What kind of services then do you offer in the Department on Disability within the city of Los Angeles?
Sure. Well, we have a pretty broad mandate. We're supposed to ensure that every single city service, program, activity, and facility is accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities.
Okay.
Right? So we cover a little bit of everything. We're divided into 4 divisions. We do a lot of direct compliance. We have an ADA division that works mostly with other departments, like the other city departments are our clients, and to help them make their programs, activities, and facilities accessible. We do accessible communications through there, everything from sign language interpreting to captioning and so on. We have the city's AIDS Coordinator's Office as part of our department. They run the city's AIDS prevention and education programs, including the city's syringe exchanges and overdose prevention. We have a community outreach and education division. We do intake and information and referral. So if a person with a disability needs a service, even outside of city government services, we help connect them to those services. And we work with individuals with disabilities, their families, caregivers, allies, organizations that serve them, really everybody we can to make sure this is an inclusive world for people with disabilities.
I don't expect an exact number, but what is the number of people in Los Angeles requiring or using your services on the daily? Do you have a ballpark on that one? Because it's got to be big.
Right, that's actually more of a trick question than you'd think.
Oh.
If you're talking about people sort of coming in the front door or calling us, it might be a dozen to a few dozen any given day. If you're talking about a day where we are hosting an event, it might be 200 people coming to our disability art show where we're promoting artists and trying to turn their art into, the sort of a living wage and workplace space. If it's the Abilities Expo, we're touching and working with 3,000-4,000 people with disabilities and their families and so on. And also if it's the community that's listening to the mayor give a press conference after the fires, for example, and we have an interpreter there. That's our department that's making sure that interpreter is there, and that's serving thousands of people as well. So any given day, the city of Los Angeles is serving thousands of people with disabilities.
Let's talk real quick about not only your emergency services division, but the DME portion of that, the Durable Medical Equipment Program. How do those programs work?
Great question. Well, a couple things. The Durable Medical Equipment Program is something in our Community Outreach and Education division. It literally provides equipment for people with disabilities. We're trying to be a provider of last resort. So if somebody needs a wheelchair or a walker or a rollator, or sometimes even a shower bench. There's some very practical things people need on a day-to-day basis that it might take months for them to apply for state benefits or federal benefits, for example. We try and get those to Angelinos. In emergency situations, that whole world changes. My department is very invested in emergency preparedness, response, and recovery, and the fires really brought that out recently. People with disabilities and an aging population are particularly vulnerable. So the DME program, temporarily we provided hospital beds. We worked on emergency backup batteries for people who had equipment that might lose power or had lost power. And these were really life-saving endeavors. Broadly, in emergency management and response for the fires, for example, we spent hundreds of hours in the Emergency Operations Center. We staffed 2 different seats in there, the Disability Access and Functional Needs seat. We make sure people with disabilities are served quickly and as best as possible. The Emergency Management Department has caches of other supplies that people need. We go into the shelters and make sure they're accessible. and try and reach out directly to people with disabilities who are in that kind of space. So there's an extraordinary amount of work that goes into emergency response. The city has plans across literally all departments incorporating people with disabilities in our emergency response. And that's an absolute top priority, I think, moving forward. The fires taught us a lot. I'll add one more footnote is back during COVID, the early pandemic, we pulled together a program and fed probably did 180,000 meals, doing 3,000 to 5,000 meals a day for people with disabilities who couldn't have safe access to stores and restaurants and food supplies. And so we worked with Access Services, the county paratransit. We worked with the zoo and the library, the places to pick up and drop off and deliver this food. So my team does extraordinary work in responding to emergencies with our city partners.
How is our transportation as far as people with disabilities are concerned, need to use public transportation? Are we up there pretty good, or does it need a lot of work?
It's such a high need that it's a tough mandate to get there. So we've got LADOT and our bus systems, we've got Metro and their bus system, and the train system. The beauty is, for example, the trains are much newer than a New York or a Washington. Yeah. And so we actually have a much more accessible rail route. Our buses are generally accessible, but it's important that we make sure, for example, all our drivers are trained. I have a colleague, I believe he lives in the city of West Hollywood, who he's got cerebral palsy, and it's hard for him to board a bus. And he does not use a walker or a wheelchair. He doesn't like to, he can, he does sometimes. And he has he's gotten to a bus and asked for them to put the ramp down and been told, well, you don't have a wheelchair. We don't have to do that. I said, well, no. You actually have to do it for anybody that needs that ramp to access it. So sometimes it's education. Again, I think most of our drivers are well trained for city and county or city and metro. But a lot of it's just education. Transportation is huge.
And are the Olympics and the FIFA World Cup, are those things you look to and go, okay, this is our drop dead moment. We have to have X amount of things done by this time. We have to.
The games are going to have an extraordinary impact on Los Angeles. So the Olympics and Paralympics, the FIFA World Cup, they got a Super Bowl in between there. I think we've got an LPGA championship in there. These already are becoming a driver to make sure accessibility is in place. And we're trying to work with that. The hitch is the scale it needs to be done on is truly extraordinary. It's sort of speeding up all our processes to get there. So yes, we're using the games as a catalyst to improve accessibility. I got to actually travel to Rio for the Paralympics, which was a wonderful moment, and actually sit in on the conversations with the International Paralympic Committee and International Olympic Committee. And you're competing against other cities. You're trying to sell why your city is the best for the Olympics and Paralympics. But at the same time, you're also trying to figure out how the Olympics and Paralympics are going to really change the legacy of the city you're in. It's the legacy energy. So we got our money in that. We are working very hard to get there. Again, with the city budget struggling a bit right now, trying to figure out how to fund the games work is tough. But we are making sure that sort of disability is in every different sort of plan and grouping and work group. That's not just sort of the Department of Disability will take care of that later. It's that everyone has a responsibility to do their part in accessibility. And it's coming. And one more footnote there, it's funny because a lot of folks think the Paralympics have to really be accessible because you've got all these athletes with disabilities. Well, the Olympics are still bigger than the Paralympics, quite frankly, and more people with disabilities as spectators are going to probably show up for the Olympics than the Paralympics, just in terms of scale. Both need to be equally accessible. And again, it's for the athletes, it's for the spectators. But I was in Rio and, in a stadium, and the press boxes weren't accessible. Well, there are people with disabilities in the media, right, that need to have a press box that's accessible. I also sat in a brand new stadium with a person who's in a wheelchair, a Paralympian, and one of my city commissioners, Candace Cable. And she was sitting next to me, and it was a great design for wheelchairs, and people were not using wheelchairs, the way the seats were set up. Except the bar was right here across her face. I was watching the tennis match. Again, these are things that the city of LA and regionally we're depending on not having to build a lot of stadiums because we have a lot in place which are great. But we really need to think about how we're going to modify things to make them truly accessible and for that to be a legacy beyond the games. And our legacy, we want accessibility to be one of those top 4 or 5 items where this city will be physically more accessible, will be digitally more accessible, and the attitude and understanding of Angelenos about inclusion and accessibility will be greater than it's ever been.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.